We had just broken off from the incendiary run over Tokyo and were heading due east, making for Northfield on Tinian. B-29, serial number 42 to 63,477, nickname Weary Dina. The outbore number 3 engine on the left wing had taken flak over the target, and the oil pressure was dropping at a rate you could see with the naked eye. I stared at the instrument panel, my fingers already stiff with cold, the sensation in my fingertips like pressing on ice instead of metal knobs. I pushed the mixture to full rich and set the prop pitch to minimum drag, but the vibration from the R-3350 was coming through the wing spar into the cockpit, and the frequency was wrong. Not the normal mechanical roar. Something deeper, slower, like a heart struggling to squeeze in a few extra beats inside a chest. My co-pilot, Lieutenant Hoyt McAllister, glanced at me without saying a word. His oxygen mask was crusted with frost, only his eyes visible. I could read what was in them. We both run the fuel numbers 3 times. If number 3 quit completely, the remaining 3 right engines would have to haul a fully loaded 40,000-pound bomber back to Tinian, and our fuel margin would approach 0. Maybe not enough. Definitely not enough. Captain, the top turret gunner, Tech Sergeant Vincent Pappalardo. His voice forced its way through the intercom, shredded by static. 8 o'clock low. Something there. I tilted my head and looked down through the left side window. The cloud layer lay about 8,000 feet below us, an unbroken sheet of stratocumulus, a sickly gray-white under the moonlight, like a floating corpse spread across the entire Pacific. Above it, nothing. The starlight was cold. The moonlight was cold. The whole night sky as clean as a black operating table. I don't see it. Not an aircraft, Pappalardo said. His voice had changed. I'd flown 14 missions with him. I'd never heard that tone. Not a Japanese fighter. Not. Hoyt had already unbuckled, twisting sideways to press his face against the plexiglass. His breath fogged the surface. He wiped it with a gloved hand, and it fogged again. Then what the hell is it? He said. I saw it. On the surface of the clouds, just off our left side, there was a point of light. No, not a point. A sphere. Maybe 3 feet in diameter for at most. It skimmed along the top of the cloud deck, moving at almost exactly our speed, holding perfect relative position. The light it gave off wasn't the white of a searchlight, not the yellow of a flare, not the orange-red of exhaust. It was a color I'd never seen from any source, somewhere between cold blue and warm gold, like a star frozen inside liquid amber, then switched on. Before I could speak, a second sphere appeared, rising out of the clouds as if surfacing from water. Then a third, a fourth, a fifth. They formed a loose diamond off our left side, about 500 yards out, pacing our B-29 at a cruising speed of 220 knots. No one spoke in the cabin. The intercom channel was open. I could hear everyone breathing. 9 men, 9 different frequencies of fear. Tail gunner Willie Cruz, the farm kid from Texas who never stopped talking. His channel was silent now, too. I did what any aircraft commander would do. I eased the control yoke slightly to the left, testing. The 5 spheres shifted left in perfect unison. No change in relative position. I banked right. They moved right. I pushed forward into a descent. They followed. I pulled back into a climb. They climbed. The precision wasn't tracking. It was coupling. As if there were an invisible steel cable between us, welded across 2 coordinate systems. Could be some kind of weather phenomenon, Hoyt said. His voice was steady, but his hands on the controls were shaking. Ball lightning. St. Elmo's fire. Japanese balloon bombs. There's got to be an explanation. I didn't answer, because I knew he was wrong. I'd seen St. Elmo's fire. Ionized air discharging a long wing. Tips and prop hubs in a storm cell. A faint purple or blue glow that flickers and dances. But this wasn't that. Their light was steady. Too steady for any kind of combustion or discharge. Their motion was continuous, with no inertia, no transition between acceleration and deceleration. They went from still to 220 knots, and from 220 knots back to still, with no gradient in between. It violated everything I knew about aircraft. Then number 3 engine died completely. The prop didn't feather. It windmilled, spinning helplessly in the slipstream, making a sound like a giant cricket's wings. The nose of the B-29 yawed hard to the right. I had to stand on full left rudder to haul it back. The number of spheres was increasing. They weren't rising out of the clouds anymore. They were just appearing out of nowhere. I stopped counting at 12 because something else dragged my attention away. They began to change color, from that amber blue into deep red. Not the red of a warning light, not the red of exhaust, something darker, deeper, like Venus blood under ultraviolet light. Then purple, then a color I couldn't name. My visual system insisted it was a color, but my brain refused to match it to anything on any known scale. My skin started to prickle. Not cold, not hypoxia, something like static electricity, starting at the scalp, running down my spine, all the way to my fingertips and the soles of my feet. My hair stood up under my flight cap. I could feel every follicle tightening, like fingernails lightly scraping the back of my neck, but not skin. Nerves. A sound crept into the intercom. Not speech, not static, a hum so low it was almost inaudible. Around 60 hertz, right at the lower edge of human hearing, where you can't tell if you're actually hearing it or if your skull is resonating. It ebbed and swelled, like someone slowly drawing a bow across the G string of a cello in a vast empty room. Not pressing hard enough for a clear tone, just that unsettling friction between sound and vibration. They're talking. That was the bombardier, Ray Peterson. He sat in the nose, with the widest view of anyone on board. His voice was soft, like he was sleep-talking. Not talking, there's something in my head. Peterson, shut off your channel, I said. No response. His channel stayed open. I could hear him muttering under his breath. Not English, not Japanese, not any language with syllables I could recognize. It was a continuous stream of sound, no breaks between phonemes, like an endless ribbon woven from consonants and vowels. Navigator Chuck Hamilton turned in his seat to look at me. The faint glow from the instrument panel lit his face from below, the shadows in his eye sockets making him look 20 years older. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Then he pointed at his window. Right side. There were spheres on the right now, too. 6 of them, symmetrically arranged. We were surrounded. This is where I want to pause the narrative for the first time. Not because what comes next gets more terrifying. It does. But because at this point, something happened that I never told anyone in the 63 years after the war. Not my wife. Not my children. Not a single military debriefer. I buried it at 2:31 a.m. on January 27th, 1945 at 21,000 feet aboard B-29 serial number 42 to 63,477. The thing is, it was too quiet. So quiet you can't really tell it, because language is built for noise and disturbance. And this had none. Its horror lay precisely in its silence. Under the gaze of those 12, no, 18 now, spheres in that 60 hertz hum, with the stream of inhuman syllables coming through Peterson's channel, I suddenly felt something. A certainty, not reasoned out, not observed and inferred. It appeared directly in my mind, like someone had opened my skull and driven a red-hot nail deep into my frontal lobe. I knew, with absolute clarity, that these spheres were not here to observe us, not to track us, not to study us. They were waiting. Waiting for what? For us to hit the ocean. They didn't care who we were. Didn't care about the serial number of this B-29, the names of the crew, where we took off from, or where we dropped our incendiaries. What they cared about existed on a scale that had no overlap with what we cared about. The way a human doesn't care about a war between 2 colonies of ants, doesn't care if one nest is wiped out by another, or if a single ant loses 3 legs and struggles back toward the mound. You pass by, maybe glance down, then keep walking. We were that ant, and they had paused, looked down at us. Not out of concern, not out of hostility, not even out of curiosity, simply because our struggle, number 3 engine dead, fuel running out, a crew praying in fear, registered in whatever dimension they perceived as a signal they could notice. Like walking along and suddenly hearing a faint, repetitive rustle in the grass. You stop, not because you fear the grass, not because you want to harm what's in it, but because the sound catches your attention. You crouch, part the blades, and see a moth with shattered wings spinning in the dirt. What do? Nothing. You watch for a moment, then stand and continue on your way. That's what they were watching. Not a B-29 bomber. Not 9 frightened human beings. A broken wing moth. And I can't explain how I knew this. It wasn't communication, not language, not imagery. It was simply there, embedded in my cognition. As certain as knowing your own name. No process, no reasoning, no evidence, and no doubt. I doubted everything else. But not this. Hoyt was calling me. His voice cut through the 60 hertz hum, like it was traveling across miles of water. Captain, Captain. I snapped back. The spheres were still there. 18 of them. Steady light. Fixed positions. The number 3 prop was still windmilling. The sound in Peterson's channel was still there, but weaker now, like a receding tide. You spaced out for about 15 seconds, Hoyt said. There was something in his voice I had never heard in this veteran of 42 missions. Not fear. I'd seen fear over Ploiești, over Schweinfurt, over Hamburg's firestorm. Those were fear. This was something more fundamental. What's left after fear has been distilled. I'm fine, I said. You were smiling. I raised a hand to my face. The oxygen mask covered the lower half, but I could feel the muscles at the corners of my eyes still holding the afterimage of contraction. I had been smiling. Not a grin, not a grimace, something looser, almost like relief. The moth knows it's going to die. What it doesn't know is that something is crouched down, part of the grass, and is watching it. That feeling of being observed is more devastating than death itself, and also more calming, because in that moment, you realize something. Your death is, to some things in the universe, worth pausing for, worth a glance. That fact alone carries a strange kind of meaning you never expected. That was the last clear thought I had at 2:34 a.m. on January 27th, 1945, in the cockpit of a B-29 descending toward the Pacific, surrounded by 32 glowing spheres. Then the windmilling on number 3 stopped. Not a restart. The propeller was forcibly halted without any mechanical failure. The blades locked from full windmill to a dead stop, as if 5 invisible fingers had gripped the hub and tightened every bearing. I checked every instrument. Oil pressure, 0. Cylinder head temperature, dropping. Fuel flow, 0. Everything said it was a dead engine, but the way it stopped was wrong. A windmilling prop doesn't just stop. It slows as air resistance overcomes rotational inertia, dropping from hundreds of RPM to tens to single digits before finally settling at some random angle. That process can take tens of seconds, even minutes, depending on airspeed and pitch. Number 3 went from full windmill to complete stop in less than 2 seconds. And it stopped vertical. 2 blades, one pointing straight up, one straight down, perfectly perpendicular to the horizon. Not random. Placed. Every light in the cockpit flickered at the same instant. Not out brighter. Twice normal intensity, then dropping back. The panel glow, the radio indicators, the compass lighting, all in sync. For that instant, the brightness let me see every detail in the cockpit that had been hidden in shadow. The wear on Hoyt's flight suit elbows, a scratch on the inside of the windshield I'd never noticed in 37 missions, the sweat prints my own hands had left on the yoke. Then the lighting returned to normal. But the color was wrong. The cockpit lighting, which had been a warm yellow, shifted to the exact same color as the spheres outside. That unnameable, unclassifiable hue, somewhere between cold blue and warm gold. Yet neither, spread across every instrument, every pane of plexiglass, every face. Under that light, Hoyt didn't look alive. His skin reflected it in a way that reminded me of a drowning man, face up, just inches beneath the surface. He looked at me. I looked at him. We both knew what the other was seeing. The top turret suddenly began to move. Not Pappalardo. His voice came through the intercom, terrified, breaking apart. I'm not touching it. It's moving on its own. The turret was a Sperry-built upper remote turret, twin, 50 caliber M2 Brownings. It was controlled by a reflector sight at the gunner station. Move the sight, the turret follows. A pure follow-up system. No auto-tracking. No radar guidance. No mechanism for it to operate without input. But it was moving, slowly, clockwise, from 12 o'clock toward 3. The electric motor, driving the gearbox, cut sharply through the background hum, a high, metallic keening. Then it stopped, locked onto a bearing. I followed its line. Out past the starboard window, beyond the formation of spheres farther out, maybe 1,500 yards slightly above our altitude, there was a larger sphere. The others had been 3 or 4 feet across. This one, I couldn't judge precisely, no reference, but its apparent size was 5 or 6 times larger. at equal distance that would put it around 20 feet in diameter. It didn't approach, didn't withdraw. It simply hung there, like a researcher observing a specimen dish. The twin 50s were trained on it. Pappalardo didn't fire. Not discipline, not rules of engagement, not identification. He told me later his finger was on the trigger. He pushed with everything he had, muscles locked, trembling, but it wouldn't move. Not paralysis, not spasm, something more precise. Whatever held him acted only on the specific muscle group required to pull the trigger. Everything else worked. He could flex, clench, spread his fingers, but when he tried to fire, it was like pressing against solid steel. "Don't fire," I said. I don't know why I said it. In 1945, over the Pacific, a damaged B-29 surrounded by unknowns. Any commander would have ordered guns hot. The rules were clear. Unidentified aircraft that failed to respond could be treated as hostile. But what I said wasn't just "don't fire." Before I spoke, the sentence in my head had been different. Don't disturb it. Why would I be worried about disturbing it? I've thought about that for 63 years. The closest answer is this. Somewhere deep down, you've already accepted the absolute scale of the imbalance. You don't disturb an earthquake. You don't disturb a volcanic eruption. You don't disturb an approaching hurricane. The only correct response is silence, stillness, reducing your presence to the smallest possible trace. Not out of humility, out of survival. After about 3 minutes, the large sphere moved. Not by flying away, by vanishing. Its brightness dropped to 0 in less than a second. No motion, no retreat, just gone. At the exact same moment, 17 of the 18 smaller spheres vanished as well. One remained. It stayed above the left wingtip, about 20 feet up, perfectly aligned with the navigation light. The green light and its glow merged until you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Then it spoke. Not spoke. I said earlier there were sounds on Peterson's channel. That wasn't language. This was different. This last sphere conveyed something I could understand. Not English, not Japanese, not any language. It was direct, meaning to meaning. No syllables, no grammar, no translation. The meaning itself was like a cold coin pressed straight into your palm. It gave me a statement. No, not a statement. A question. Or a statement shaped like a question. Or the reverse. Human language can't quite hold it, but I'll try. Because this is the most important part. It said, or made me perceive, you burned that city. No akiyasashin, no anger, no judgment, just a fact it had observed. The way you'd say, it rained today, or the sun rose in the east. Then it gave me something else. I saw Tokyo, not as I'd seen it through the bomb site. Gray grids, red fires, black columns of smoke. This was something else. Same city, same night, same raid. But from another angle, I don't have a word for it, another layer. I saw every street in flames, every building, every room burning. And then I saw the people inside those rooms. Not silhouettes, not numbers in a report. Individuals, named, specific, alive, being burned to death. A mother holding 2 children, hiding in the bathroom of a wooden house. Her hair was on fire. The children had stopped crying. The heat had destroyed their airways. They couldn't make sound. Her lips were moving. She was singing. I couldn't hear the melody, but I knew it was a lullaby. An old man kneeling on the steps of a Buddhist hall. The roof collapsed, fire falling onto his back. He didn't run. He pressed his palms together and closed his eyes. His robe curled, blackened, broke apart in the flames. A boy, 15, maybe 16, stood in a canal where the water had already begun to boil. He clung to a wooden piling at the bank. The skin on his fingers sloughed off in the scalding water, exposing muscle and tendon beneath. He was calling a name. 2 syllables. Maybe his mother. Maybe someone he loved. I don't know. I saw hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands. Not all at once. One after another, like an album being flipped at impossible speed. Each image lingered for less than a second, but every one of them burned itself into something behind my eyes. I couldn't close them. My eyelids could shut, but the images remained. They weren't coming through my eyes. They were being poured straight in at the far end of the optic nerve. I didn't cry, not because I didn't feel grief, but because the scale of it exceeded what my species evolved to process. My mind felt like a machine fed 10 times its rated voltage. Fuses blown, circuits burned out, nothing left but a silent overload. The sphere remained in my awareness for maybe 30 seconds, maybe 30 minutes. I lost any sense of time. When I came back, it was gone. The sky was just sky again. Cold starlight, white moonlight, gray-white clouds. The instrument panel was warm yellow again. Peterson's channel was silent. The 60 Hz hum was gone. There were just the 9 of us in a B-29 with 3 engines still turning, flying at 19,000 feet toward Tinian in silence. No one spoke. Not because there was nothing to say, because we all knew that the moment we spoke, once we used human language to describe what had just happened, it would become a story. And stories can be questioned, analyzed, broken apart, forgotten. None of us wanted that. We wanted to seal it exactly as it was inside our skulls, like a black box welded shut, never to be opened. We landed at Northfield, Tinian, at 5:47, almost 2 hours behind schedule. The fuel gauge read 37 gallons remaining. An R-3350 burns roughly 300 gallons an hour at cruise. 37 gallons meant about 7 minutes of flight time left. After we landed, the ground crew gathered around. They looked at the number 3 propeller, stopped in that precise vertical position, but no one asked any questions. Not because they weren't curious, because in that war, every crew that made it back carried something that couldn't be explained. Ask one question too many, and you might hear an answer you didn't want. The intelligence officer came. A thin Army Air Forces major with round glasses, fingers stained yellow from cigarettes. He sat in a windowless office and asked the standard questions. Mission execution, bombing accuracy, enemy fighters, flak density, damage assessment. I answered everything. Precisely, concisely, professionally. He didn't ask about the spheres. I knew he hadn't forgotten. He'd been told not to ask, because before we landed, another B-29 had reported something similar. A plane from the 73rd Bomb Wing. I don't remember the serial, call sign Lucky Lady. They were returning from Nagoya, about 80 nautical miles from our position, and encountered an indeterminate number of luminous objects, variable in color, exhibiting anomalous motion. The report was flagged priority, sent to Northfield Intelligence, and then quietly buried. Not suppressed, not erased, not denied. Something subtler, filed, placed into a folder labeled Meteorological Anomaly Observations, slipped into the second-to-last drawer of cabinet, locked, the key held by someone who would never be asked. That was how things like this were handled then. Not conspiracy, not cover-up, a kind of tacit silence. Everyone sensed that some things were better not known. Know too much, and a man shifts in his chair during briefings, hesitates in the air, questions his own senses at the worst possible moment. And if a B-29 pilot starts doubting his perception at 20,000 feet, he doesn't just risk himself. He risks 9 lives and a $600,000 aircraft. So the intelligence officer didn't ask. I didn't tell. The 9 of us went back to our barracks, showered, ate breakfast, slept a few hours, then sat in briefing that afternoon with new targets, new routes, new weather. We went on bombing Japanese cities. Over the next 3 months, I flew 12 more missions, reached my rotation of 35, earned the Distinguished Flying Cross, took a troop ship back to San Francisco. The war ended 5 months later. I left the service, got married, took a test pilot job at Boeing in Wichita, had 2 kids, watched them grow up, go to college, get married, give me grandchildren. I had a stroke in 2003. Left side doesn't quite cooperate anymore, but my mind's still intact. In those 63 years, I've talked about the war countless times. At veterans gatherings, in interviews for my grandson's history homework, in a therapist's office, 1997, after my wife died. I couldn't sleep. The doctor called it delayed trauma, told me to talk about what I kept buried. I tried. I talked about Ploieshti, the refineries burning, about Schweinfurt, the black bursts of flak over the ball-bearing plants, about Hamburg, scraps of paper and burned curtains carried 15,000 feet up by the firestorm. But I never spoke about those 30 minutes in the early hours of January 27th, 1945. Not once. Not because I was afraid of being called unstable. By the 90s, people talked about UFOs, about things they couldn't explain. I could have joined that conversation. I could have laid it out and said, "This is what I saw. Decide for yourselves." I didn't. The reason is simpler and more complicated. I was afraid that once I said it out loud, it wouldn't be mine anymore. Those 30 minutes, the spheres, that feeling of being observed, the images of Tokyo burning poured directly into my mind. They sat inside my skull for 63 years like something sealed in amber. Something that didn't belong to war or to peace. The moment I put into words, it would become language. And language has limits. It can only describe variations of things already described. When you face something outside its reach, describing it becomes reduction. Translation. Betrayal. That's why I'm sitting here now, speaking to this camera, or to whoever is behind it. Because in April 2026, something happened. My granddaughter Emily works at the Department of Defense. Civilian data analysis. She called me last week. Her voice was strange, not like her. She said, "Grandpa, a batch of UAP sighting files from the 1940s through the 1960s is being declassified. The code name is Blue Twilight. Over 400 reports from World War II and the Korean War." She said, "Grandpa, I saw one dated January 27th, 1945. 500 Bomb Group, 883rd Squadron, B-29 serial number 42 to 63,477. Aircraft Commander, you." I said yes. She said, "It's labeled Meteorological Anomaly Observation." I said yes. She said, "Grandpa, that wasn't weather, was it?" I was quiet for a moment. Then I said no. She said there was something else in the file. Not a sighting report, a memo. From Pacific Theater Intelligence to Army Air Forces Command, dated February 3rd, 1945. Title: Preliminary Assessment of Luminous Sphere Phenomenon. The conclusion section had been blacked out. Not a few words with marker. An entire paragraph, about 300 words, covered with a solid black strip. On photocopy, it was just a rectangle. But when she scanned it with multispectral imaging, that's her job now, digitizing declassified records across different wavelengths, she found the text underneath could be recovered. The black strip blocked visible light, not infrared. Ink and paper reflect differently in that band. The computer could reconstruct what was hidden. She reconstructed it. Read it once. Then she called me. She asked, "Grandpa, what color were the spheres?" I said, "A color I can't name." She said, "The memo calls it non-standard spectral color." Exact wording. Witnesses consistently describe a color that cannot be mapped to any known spectral calibration or standard color space. This visual characteristic constitutes the primary identifying marker of the phenomenon. Non-standard spectral color. 63 years later, someone had given it a name. Not really a name, more like an admission that it couldn't be named. She asked, "Grandpa, what did they do to you?" I said, "They made me see Tokyo burning." There was a long silence on the line. I could hear her breathing, the hum of her refrigerator, traffic outside in Washington, D.C., a different kind of background noise than Tinian in 1945. But in that moment, across the line, 63 years collapsed. She said, "Grandpa, the last paragraph of the memo says this." She read it to me, the words that had been blacked out for 63 years. Conclusion section, Pacific Theater Intelligence, February 3rd, 1945. Based on 47 independent sighting reports collected between November 1944 and January 1945, and 11 cross-validated crew records provided by the 20th Air Force, this office reaches the following assessment. The unidentified luminous sphere phenomenon is not Axis technology, not any known atmospheric electrical discharge, and not a collective psychological stress response among witnesses. The phenomenon exhibits the following unexplained characteristics. 1. Precise synchronized movement with Allied aircraft inconsistent with any known aerodynamic principles. 2. Widely reported involuntary perceptual inputs, including but not limited to non-auditory understanding, non-visual imagery, and uncontrollable affective shifts. 3. Statistically significant correlation with large-scale combustion events. Of the 47 recorded sightings, 44 occurred on return routes, following incendiary attacks on urban targets. This office recommends designating the phenomenon as accompanying non-cooperative observers, and further recommends tiered archival handling of all such incidents. Pending further directive, all related reports should be categorized under meteorological anomaly observations to mitigate potential psychological impact on flight personnel. Finally, This office must record an observation that cannot be accommodated within existing cognitive frameworks. In 11 cross-verifiable cases, different crews reported highly consistent perception structures of the same phenomenon, yet the specific content of those perceptions varied by crew. The phenomenon appears capable of accessing mission-specific operational details and generating perceptual feedback directly corresponding to the target engaged on that date. In all cases, the feedback manifested as a first-person re-experiencing of the deaths of ground personnel within the attack target area. This is not intelligence. This is not reconnaissance. This is not any form of military operation. We do not know what this is. My granddaughter finished reading. Her voice was shaking, not from fear, but from realization that her grandfather, the old man on a couch in Wichita, left side weak, watching baseball reruns, was one of those 11 cross-validated records. His perceptions written into that memo, blacked out, filed away, locked in a steel cabinet underground, and then, 81 years later, pulled back into the light by her imaging system. She asked, "Grandpa, that perceptual feedback, the first-person deaths, they're talking about you, aren't they?" I said, "Yes." She said, "What did you see?" I said, "A mother, 2 children, a lullaby, an old man, a temple, hands folded, a boy, a canal, a name." She said, "What was the name?" I said, "I don't know. I couldn't make it out." 2 syllables. Silence again. Then she said, "Grandpa, I need to tell you something. It's not public yet. The declassification process isn't finished. Maybe a few more months. But you need to know. The spheres have appeared again. March 29th, 2026. Nevada, Nellis Air Force Base. Night training mission. 2F-35, a Lightning Tooth. Call signs Viper 11 and Viper 12. Standard night air combat training. Altitude 30,000 feet. Airspace designation Dreamland. Time 1:40. The lead pilot of Viper 11. Her name is redacted in the file. Listed as source reported the following. After completing a high-G left brake maneuver, she observed a luminous sphere approximately 50 feet off her left wingtip. Estimated diameter 3 to 4 feet. Color indescribable. The sphere maintained precise, synchronized maneuvering with her aircraft for approximately 12 seconds, including a 7.5G turn. The F-35s and /APG-81 AESA radar detected no physical target. The AQ-37 distributed aperture system, full 360-degree infrared and visual coverage, captured clear optical imagery of the sphere. After 12 seconds, the sphere vanished in place. No displacement, no acceleration. Luminosity dropped directly to 0. The report was flagged as a high-confidence UAP encounter and submitted through the all-domain Anomaly Resolution Office procedures established in 2022. Then, this is the critical part. Source say added the following note in the remark section. My granddaughter read that part slowly, like she was placing each word exactly where it belonged. 3 hours prior to this mission, I attended a briefing for a precision strike on a designated target within Syria. The strike was executed via unmanned systems. I was not directly involved in weapons release. The briefing included real-time ISR footage of the target area. In the footage, a structure identified as an enemy personnel assembly point was struck by 2 GBU 53/B small diameter bombs. Post-impact thermal imagery showed several moving heat signatures within the collapsed structure. One smaller heat signature, assessed as a minor, remained near the edge of the debris for approximately 40 seconds before ceasing movement. During the 12-second encounter with the unidentified sphere, I experienced the following involuntary perception. I saw that smaller heat signature again, not as thermal imagery, from ground level, from within the structure, looking upward as the ceiling fractured in fire and opened to the night sky. I heard a voice, not through my headset, a female voice repeating a word. I could not identify the word, but I knew it was a name. I have not previously disclosed the emotional impact of the briefing imagery to any party. I do not understand how the phenomenon accessed this memory, nor the purpose of the feedback it generated. Recommend cross-referencing this report with historical archives. Recommend cross-referencing this report with historical archives. Historical Archives, January 1945. Tokyo, a mother, a lullaby, a two-syllable name. They cross-referenced it. The result matched. Not the content, of course not. Syria in 2026 and Tokyo in 1945 don't share names, melodies, or building materials. The flames are the same. What matched wasn't content. It was pattern. The pattern of those spheres appearing after a killing operation, intercepting the return route, and forcing the ones who carried it out to re-experience, in first person, the deaths of those below. 81 years. Same light, same pattern, same unnameable color. The Department of Defense had planned the next phase of UAP disclosures for September 2026, codenamed Disclosure Day. The date was set at the end of 2025, a response to mounting pressure from Congress. But between late March and early April 2026, within 2 weeks of the Viper 11 report, two things happened. First, Nellis Air Force Base, Edwards Air Force Base, and Eglin Air Force Base reported 7 similar sightings in 10 days. 7, all during night training missions, all involving pilots who had recently participated in or supported real-world strike operations. All included perceptual feedback. The 7 pilots' accounts were recorded separately, then cross-compared. The results were sent somewhere far above the all-domain Anomaly Resolution Office. Second, someone began pushing to move Disclosure Day forward. I don't know who. My granddaughter doesn't either. She's an analyst. She sees data flow, not faces. But she sees priority tags change. From routine to urgent. From urgent to top priority. From top priority to something she had never seen before. No words, just an alphanumeric designation with no explanation attached. She said, "Grandpa, I don't think they're trying to reveal something. I think they're afraid of something." I said, "Afraid of what?" She said, "I don't know, but there's something else." That 1945 memo, the Pacific Theater one, after it was archived on February 3rd, it was pulled again on February 7th. The reviewer's signature is a code I can't trace. But after that review, someone added a handwritten note to the last page, the one with the conclusion. She read it to me. 5 words. The handwriting rough, like it was written in a hurry or under strain. Blue-black ink, different from the typewriter ribbon. We are being watched, judged. February 7th, 1945. 6 months before the war ended. 5 months before the Trinity test. 6 months before Hiroshima. Whoever wrote that didn't know about the bomb yet. All he knew was what was in that memo. The spheres that follow bombers home, that forced air crews to witness what they had done. They weren't weapons, not enemies, not anything that could be fought. They were a gaze lowering itself through the grass, watching a broken-winged moth spin in the dirt, then standing and moving on. But in the instant they crouched, the moth received something its nervous system was never meant to process. Translated into human language, it becomes those 5 words. We're being watched, judged. It's April 2026. I'm sitting in my house in Wichita. Outside, the sycamore is budding. Kansas wind in April is strong. The branches scratch softly against the glass. My left hand rests on the arm of the wheelchair, fingertips tingling. Stroke. Aftermath, the doctor says. I look at the sky. Kansas sky is wide, wider than the Pacific ever felt. No clouds. Pale blue. I don't see anything up there. Or maybe I do. I saw it at 2:34 a.m. on January 27th, 1945, in the cockpit of B-29 serial number 42 to 63,477. They were there. They've always been there. Above every mile I flew. Above every column of smoke from every incendiary dropped. Behind every cloud lit red by burning cities. They're watching, not observing, not studying. Watching, the way you watch a moth. You don't do anything. You watch for a moment, then you stand and walk on. But do you remember the moth? February 7th, 1945. An unnamed intelligence officer writes 5 words on a blacked-out memo. April 2026. Those words are recovered from beneath the strip. March 29th, 2026, 1:40. A pilot at 30,000 feet over Nevada is forced to witness the final moments of a child she saw hours earlier, as a heat signature fading to stillness. 81 years. They've always been there, always watching. What are they waiting for? I don't know. I didn't know in 1945. I don't know in 2026. But I've started asking a question I never asked in 63 years. Not until my granddaughter read me those 5 words. If they're judging us, what is the standard? Not whether we destroy ourselves. They don't care about that. Moths die. All of them do. The one you kneel to watch and the million you never notice. They all end up in the dirt. You don't care whether it dies. You care how it dies. The angle of the broken wings. The circles it traces. The final twitch before it stops moving. What if what they care about is the way we kill each other? If every instance of humans burning one another at scale, from Tokyo to Dresden, from Hiroshima to Nagasaki, from napalm in Hue to precision-guided bombs in Syria, registers in their perceptual field as something worth stopping to watch. Not because of scale, because of some quality we can't understand. Fire has a texture. Death has a texture. Pain has a texture. Those spheres aren't watching the fire. They're watching the particular form that pain takes within it, something that, in whatever dimension they perceive, has a value they can recognize, maybe even appreciate. That's what that intelligence officer meant when he wrote, judged. Not judgment, appraisal. They crouch, part the grass, and watch the moth spin in the burning field. Not to save it, not to hasten its death, not to study its wings, to see the specific light it gives off as it burns. That light is the same color as theirs. That unnameable color between cold blue and warm gold. The color of the moth burning. My name is James Howard McIntyre, retired Major, United States Army Air Forces, B-29 Aircraft Commander, 500th Bomb Group, 883rd Squadron, 35 combat missions, Distinguished Flying Cross. On January 27, 1945, over 24 degrees north, 142 degrees east, I was surrounded by 32 luminous spheres. They made me watch a city burn. They made me watch a mother, an old man, a boy die. They said nothing. They just watched me for 30 minutes. Then they were gone. One of them left me with something. A single line. I have never told it to anyone in 63 years. Not my wife. Not my children. Not my granddaughter. I didn't know what it meant, whether it was a threat, a promise, a statement, or something beyond language. It said, "You burn well." That's my story. The 2026 disclosures won't tell you this. They'll give you non-standard spectral color and accompanying non-cooperative observers. Acronyms, classifications, something bureaucracies can digest. They'll tell you everything is under control, that the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office is following procedure, that more information will be released in due course. But you already know more than they'll say. You know those spheres didn't begin in 1945. You know they didn't return in 2026. You know they've always been there, above every fire we've lit for each other, moving in silence, in perfect synchrony. You know what they're watching. The only question left is, what are they waiting for? The next fire? Or for one moth to finally look up through burning grass, across 81 years, through that unnameable light, and look back? It's getting dark outside. Kansas evenings in April linger. Sunlight filters through new leaves, drifting across the carpet in slow, shifting patterns. I watch that light slide off the back of my left hand, inching toward the edge. I remember the night of January 27th, 1945. After the last flicker, the sky returned to itself. Cold starlight, white moonlight, gray-white clouds. 3 engines turning, cutting through minus 43 Celsius air with that steady, reassuring drone. Hoyt slumped in the co-pilot's seat. Not asleep, not awake, just shut down. Peterson's channel silent. The turret frozen at some random angle. Willie Cruz in the tail, whispering the Lord's Prayer over and over. I held the yoke and stared ahead. Nothing on the horizon. The Pacific below, 19,000 feet down, black, silent, endless. In 3 hours, the sun would rise behind us, paint the clouds pink and orange, pull every face in that cabin back out of shadow. But before that, through those 3 hours of darkness, I kept thinking about one thing. That line, "You burn well." Who was it meant for? Me? Tokyo? The fire itself? All of us? Or something older than us? Older than fire? I don't know. But now I know something else. On March 29th, 2026, over Nellis, that F-35 pilot, source, wrote one final line in her report. My granddaughter didn't read it at first. I asked. She hesitated, then did. Source A wrote, In the final second before the sphere disappeared, I perceived a statement, not a sentence. A complete unit of meaning, indivisible. No subject, no verb, no tense. It existed directly in my cognition, as if it had always been there, only illuminated in that moment. Translated into English, it approximates, "You are burning too. You are burning too." 1945, 2026. 81 years. From piston engines to turbofans. From Norden sights to distributed aperture systems. From a mother singing in a wooden house in Tokyo to a child's heat signature fading under rubble in Syria. The weapons changed. The battlefield changed. The sky didn't. They didn't. They're still watching, waiting for a moth to look back. Maybe tonight, when you turn out the light and lie in the dark, at that edge where thought begins to blur, you'll feel it. Not eyes, not cameras, something older, quieter, away from a direction you can't locate. Don't be afraid. It isn't hostility. It isn't judgment. It's just something crouching down, parting the grass, watching you burn, and you burn well.